Welcome back to the now named Pediatric Awesome Media Cast. I think that's what Brandon and I settled on. Or maybe I got the adjective and noun backwards. But we're here at episode 14, and Brandon and I have a very special surprise. Brandon, say hello, please.
Hello, interwebs. How are you guys doing?
Those of you reviewing this and not listening to it on the podcast have already noticed down there along the bottom of your screen we have a third participant today. Generally speaking, when we have a third participant, it creates a better media cast because Brandon and I aren't doing the talking. Today's special guest is Natasha Burgert, who I will label the queen of pediatric social media right now. I don't think that's exaggerated. You might know her from Casey Kids Doc. All right, that's the name of your blog. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you might know her as Dr. Natasha on Twitter, where she has like 6,200 followers, which is about 6,000 more than Brandon and I combined. Brandon and me combined. So we're really eager to have her here. She's going to discuss some social media things. I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. He's got some key questions for her. And I want everyone to listen up because she has had more experience and can tell better stories about social media for pediatricians than anyone else online. So, Brandon, to you.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you. Well, let me first say that I'm so excited to have Natasha here with us. I've been thinking about, when we've been thinking about bringing different people, Natasha was number one on my list. So I'm so excited because, well, several reasons. But one of the reasons is because Natasha and I have had some great conversations in terms of how we need to reposition our message about social media because we both believe that this is something that, pediatricians should definitely look into. And I've always said that pediatricians, better than anybody else, should be the ones using social media because this, we tend to skew our demographic is always the younger demographic. So these are the kids, the kids today are in not too far distance will be the parents of tomorrow, and they have grown up with this sort of thing. So anyway, so I'm so excited. I don't even know where to begin because I have a lot of questions that I want to ask Natasha. Natasha, are you cool? We got a few questions that I'd like to ask you. Are you cool with that?
That sounds great.
Okay. So how long have you, so tell me a little bit about when you first saw Twitter, saw Facebook. Did you first think that this was, this is absolutely something that I have to do for the practice, or was it like most people where you got into more, for family and friends and more from a, social standpoint as opposed to from a clinical or practice standpoint?
I had been on Facebook for a while, ever since college, so I was very familiar with the medium, but I really didn't find it valuable in pediatric practice until about 2009. I had a really significant problem then that I know that you guys remember, and that was H1N1. And at that point, our practice was totally working off paper charts. We had very little demographic information except for a phone number for reaching out to our patients. And we were getting inundated on the phones with constant calls about what H1N1 was and when that vaccine was going to be in the office. So we physically didn't have a way to distribute information any better than one-on-one on the phone, and we really desperately needed something else. So at that point, that's really when I thought, I vaguely understand this free tool called Facebook, so why don't I start collecting email addresses, sending out information, and create a Facebook page so that every day I can put out a post and keep these people informed. And that was kind of the beginning of how this whole thing started. It simply started because I saw a problem and we really needed to fix it fast and we needed to fix it free. And so after that, people were I got so many positive compliments on how nice it was to hear from us on a repeated basis that it just became a natural fit to continue by sharing health messages and other announcements from the office in this manner. We started to transition after that to a practice page. That first page was just a good old personal page that Dr. Natasha set up, so we kind of used that as the foundation, and then I got the blessing of my partners to make a practice page shortly after that, and it's kind of snowballed from there.
Excellent. Now, you brought up your partners. Are they a little bit older? Could you share that with us? I mean,
We're a group of 13 My husband and I are the two youngest members of the group, although we've been here for 7 years now. And I think that although the rest of our physicians are older here in our group, our most senior physician was the first to get the iPad. So we have a very tech-savvy group.
Oh, nice, nice. Do you think that that played a big role, them just being very open to this sort of thing, or was it somehow you pitched it in a way that was so compelling to them that they had no choice but to say, yeah, let's move forward?
Maybe a little bit of both. I don't think they were very excited about the idea. I think that at that point it was very nebulous as far as our legal standings there, what we could and couldn't do there. And of course, we were one of the first kids on the block in Kansas City to be doing it, and we didn't really have anything to compare to. So I was very fortunate that my senior partners had enough faith and trust in me to do something responsible on behalf of the group. And once it started getting some traction, then they kind of just let the reins off and let me start the Twitter feed in case he could stop.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let me because I know that one of the first things that comes up is just the liability issues and what if somebody posts something negative on there. I mean, that's the number one thing. I'm guessing that was some of the things that you guys were discussing, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's new, and again, we're all sitting here with senior members on a whole bunch of paper charts. I mean, we were not even embracing EHR at that point. I mean, it was very new to a practice that's been around for over 30 years. It was something different, and so of course everyone had their hesitations, and appropriately so. Here comes some young whippersnapper who's only been here for a couple of years saying that they want to put all this stuff online. So it was a nice blend of a calculated risk on their behalf.
Was there something that changed their minds? Did you have a moment where they all said, okay, you haven't blown it, and this actually worked out for us, now we'll let you keep going?
Well, I took the old-fashioned approach and approached them with some numbers. And what I did after my little H1N1 experiment was basically show the decreased number of phone calls that my nurses were doing versus their nurses, and how my nurses were able to just defer those incoming calls to a place where we could freely distribute that information regularly, and my nurses were relatively less stressed. And I think
that is unbelievable. That is awesome.
I think that was just a big push for them to practically see its value before they were willing to let me go with it.
So talk a little bit about, well, there's two things, I guess. The first thing, before we jump into the time and how you can point people to things that have already been addressed, because that's a big component of all this, where people often back away because they say the time, but you have a very interesting perspective. But before you get to that, so tell me, so you've been on this for a little while, everybody's jumping on board, agree with it. What has it done for the practice, do you think, so far?
I think it's done phenomenal things for the practice, both for us reputationally and just new patients. I mean, I think we would all be under a rock if we didn't say that people are going to Google you and people are going to Google your practice. And I think it's just a wonderful platform for us, again, very easily in a free medium to be able to publicize the great things that we do here. We do a lot of great stuff in our group, and we have a very dynamic practice. And I'm not going to spend the money for a huge marketing team and advertising blitz, unlike some other people who might choose to do that, which we know is an effective way. We just don't have that kind of budget. So it's a great way for us to really just highlight the great things we do here. We certainly have seen new patients. I probably, at the time that I wrote the article that you mentioned for Kevin MD, Brandon, at that point I was getting about one patient a week. And I think that it's easily 2 or 3 new patients a week at this point that I'm getting just from having either a Facebook or a Twitter presence. And that's just me alone. I mean, again, we're a provider of 13, and we really try to feature our group as a whole for those providers who want to be featured. In addition to that, it's been a platform where our patients have put such positive things. And of course, at the beginning, just like you mentioned, we were really worried that someone was going to put something bad on there, and it's been exactly the opposite. We've had so many unsolicited positive remarks on that page that only benefits our digital reputation that, quite honestly, I wasn't expecting to happen when we started it. So it's been a wonderful blend of both us being able to tout what we do here, but also the patients speaking for themselves.
Chip, I think that last, I don't know, 10 seconds needs to be looped over and over again, because that soundbite is awesome about the building the community, and then how the positive feedback of the unsolicited, that's what I like that word, unsolicited positive feedback, is just tremendous. And we found a lot of that too, and we're not as engaged. Here's me talking a lot about social media, and we are engaged, but certainly not as engaged with it, and we've had the same results, and I can only imagine what it would be like if we really put all effort into this. Now, I want to ask you about, okay, so you mentioned a little bit about pointing to different things that your nurses will point patients to, or parents in this case, about certain things. So tell me a little bit, what exactly are you telling them, what are you exactly pointing to?
Well, it'll kind of depend on the topic of the season. So what I usually do is I float around while I'm here. And by that I mean most people will come up to me at this point. But originally, I was kind of floating around and saying, what are you guys hearing on the phones a lot? What questions are you guys repeatedly having to answer? Is there something I can do to help? For example, during the season change, tons of calls about seasonal allergies. Tons. And so the nurses were looking for a good resource to send them to. So we throw it up on the Facebook page. Here's something from Healthy Children. It takes me 2 seconds to put up there, and it's nothing that I've written. I'm just using those great resources that we all use as patient handouts. I'm just putting them up on Facebook and allowing the nurses to say, just look on our Facebook page, look on our Facebook page. So it's been nice for them to field personal questions on the call, but then when the parent gets off the phone and they forget to ask, oh yeah, I meant to ask that question, it gives them a place to turn. So that's one thing that we do on a very regularly, if not daily basis. For my patients also know that there's going to be quick time things that I need to tell them, that I'm going to put it on my Twitter feed. And if I'm running late, or if there's a snow cancellation, or if the hours are going to change for the practice, they know to look there, as well as Facebook. And then the blog itself has turned into a place to direct patients both before visits and after visits with information for them to learn about different issues, which has saved me a ton of time.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, one thing I discovered, Natasha, and I wonder if you've ever run into this. I blogged for a long time, and I started it simply just so I could record things that had happened to clients of mine, because so much happens every day. It's the same thing with your patients that I would forget. And I realized that I'd crossed some sort of threshold when one day I was like, I wonder if anyone is. I was trying to answer a question for myself, and I went online searching for the answer, and I realized I blogged about it 2 years ago, and it was exactly what I was looking for. And I'm like, oh, thank God I wrote this down, because that would have never hit me. And for peds, given the cyclical nature of what you have to run into, I wonder if you're going to get to start recycling your own stuff pretty handily soon.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it does just make this very personal database of things that you can refer to. I think what's interesting, just like you experienced with finding yourself there, we know our patient groups. We know what they like to hear. We know how they like to hear it. And it's so much more valuable for me to send them a post that I wrote in my own words about starting solid foods than a generic handout about starting solid foods, even though it's essentially the absolute same information, because the AAP, the Academy of Pediatrics, does a really good job to providing us those things. I know what my patients need to hear. And it may be a subtle difference, and I think that they respond to that personal information a little bit better. And so that database that you're collecting, just like you experienced, becomes really, really valuable because it's in your own words.
For years, going into pediatric offices, I found that so many doctors I know had started some sort of patient handout, and it wouldn't be just one. You could open their desk drawer, and there would be a half-dozen different topics that were important to that doctor. They'd seen, a particular diagnosis over and over again. So the doctor would say, oh, we've got to write up a handout about this, and they get 3/4 of the way through it, and by that point, maybe the cyclical nature of that diagnosis would fade, and then it never makes it out of the drawer. But today, in the social media environment, people like you actually have a forum where you can go that extra half step, complete your thought, and actually share it, get feedback, and make a difference. And that's one big difference I've realized that social media provides.
Yeah, it does allow you to provide that. But I think what's interesting too, Chip, about that whole big drawer of handouts is that my patient encounters don't work like that anymore. I mean, with my mentors, when I experienced visits with my mentors, the patient would come in, we'd diagnose them with pink eye or whatever it is, and then we needed that handout to conclude that visit, to close the loop with more information. But my patients are coming in, already have searching, already coming in with information, and already essentially knowing the answer. And a large part of that time, they're right. And I love it, because I can just come in, I can confirm the diagnosis, review the history. They already know the diagnosis and treatment plan. I can close that loop. And so really that patient handout has to come before the visit, before that diagnosis is even made. So it's totally kind of turned that patient interaction on its head. And that's where that constant flow of information, good information, directing them to good sources is so important.
Yeah, I agree. When I first started talking to our clients about assembling a content base that you would share with your customers, I had a lot of doctors tell me that they didn't want to share that stuff, not because they were being, they were trying to be greedy about it, but more because they were territorial. They were afraid of sharing it, and I tried to explain it's going to have the opposite effect. If by sharing it publicly, you will attract the type of parents who can hear what you're saying, as opposed to having to get into a couple visits and realizing we're not really talking to each other very well. Instead, parents who read what you have to say, understand your style, you know what you're getting. And that to me seems to be a big, big bonus right now.
Here's another thing that I think that Natasha has alluded to is that you only have so many, and when I say you, I mean the patients only have, of course, only a few minutes, right, with the doctor. So with that handout and that discussion, and not only so you don't confirm the diagnosis, but rather diagnose the problem because the parents don't know, it takes time away from the visit that could be spent more efficiently addressing other issues. So if the patient or the parent already has somewhat of an idea on what's going on, they're able to ask more intelligent questions and use the doctor's time much more efficiently than start from scratch every single time. So I think that there's you have written a lot of that stuff and it's there, but now it actually saves you time because now the interaction is much more engaging than it would be having to start from scratch. So I think that is huge. Now, who writes the content of all this content? Is it mostly you? Do you have other partners that collaborate with you, or how does that work, Natasha?
It's all me.
Okay, and then the next people are going to ask is like, well, how do you see patients and write content and follow up with them and update your Twitter feed, etc.? How do you do? So how do you manage all this?
Sure.
And how much time do you spend on social media?
Well, it depends. It depends. It's very interesting because so many people ask me that question, and I honestly have never quantified it because it's not something separate. It's not something separate that I do that's additional hours. This is how I do my job. I mean, this is part of my workflow. It's part of my workday. Great
answer. I love that.
If I get to my lunch hour and I have already seen 3 kids with strep throat, I know that I need to put information on Facebook about strep throat because other people need to know that that's in our community. I can field. Twitter's 140 characters long. How long does it take you to reply on Twitter? It's just something that I'll check on my computer terminal between patients here and there. I never keep a patient waiting for me to do Twitter, but we all have those times in our day that are just natural breaks. These are things that I'm checking in on continuously. If I really need to write a blog post, I might spend a couple of hours on the weekend with my husband's permission to kind of field a blog post and have him look at it and edit it. But quite honestly, that's what my noon hour is typically done. When I go home at night, I'm closing my computer. This is just how I do my job.
Excellent.
Brandon and I could use some advice on getting spousal permission. So at the end of today, maybe you can show us that.
Yeah, I always get asked, "Are you making any money while you're doing this?" I'm like, "No, it's coming back to us in other ways, though." Where? What do you mean? You know. So, talk a little bit about the tools you use. There's a ton of stuff out there. Are you native at Twitter? You know, you go to twitter.com, or do you use apps to kind of manage that? Just talk a little bit about the tools that you use.
I use Hootsuite. I'm a Hootsuite user, so that's how I manage both my Twitter feed and the Pediatric Associates Twitter feed. I am pretty organic with Twitter. I believe Twitter serves best to be using that in real time. So if I'm tweeting, I don't schedule tweets on there. I don't. If I'm tweeting, I'm on. Okay. With Facebook, I use just Facebook.com, but most of the time that I have posts on Facebook, those are scheduled. So if I see something that I particularly like, I may schedule it to distribute the information throughout the week. So I may not necessarily be on Facebook. Okay. And then the blog is whenever I hit it. So I try to post once a week on the blog. During the summer, I take time off. I'm spending time with my kids during the summer. But during the 9 months of the year, I'm pretty routine there. Okay.
Now you talked a lot about the benefits that it building the community and people appreciating it, and it's an extension of the practice, and it's an extension of what you do, your job. How has the social media improved in terms of learning different things, or finding interesting people that are doing different things, or in terms of your edification as a doctor, as just somebody that's under, like, what are the different, how does it help you in that way too, or is it just strictly patient?
No, I think it's great. I think especially with Twitter and with Facebook too, I learned so much more than I could ever give in these places. I mean, that's how I met you fine folks, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that I think what's interesting is not only am I learning things and keeping up to date, but the connections that I make on Twitter actually do improve my patient care. And I have a great recent example of being connected with a good friend of mine, Claire McCarthy from Boston Children's Hospital, who blogs under Dr. Claire and blogs for Thriving, the Boston Children's blog, and for Boston.com. And her and I have made a Twitter connection that was kind of formalized at the Academy of Pediatric conference. But through just that communication alone, I needed a patient referral. I needed to send someone to Boston. And so within a matter of 15 minutes, a simple girl from Kansas City got a consultation with a specialist at Harvard just through Twitter and through those connections. So I think that people underestimate the impact that those connections can really help patients. If I have a question about dermatology, I can tweet a local dermatologist and get a reply in about 10 minutes. I mean, who can get a dermatologist appointment in 10 minutes? I mean, using these connections are just phenomenal to augment my patient care, and I am not shy that I used to always pitch that I don't practice medicine on Twitter, but I kind of do now because I need help from the colleagues that I've made. And so not only am I learning and am I sharing, but I'm able to use those connections in order to help my patients, and it's awesome.
So when you get up in the morning, I'm curious, and you fire up your smartphone or your PC or your Mac or whatever you have, where do you start looking every day for the content? I know you said you asked the nurses. That's A+ answer. But where else do you go?
I go to Twitter. That's my live feed of information. So what I'll typically do is I'll sneak through my favorites on Twitter. And see if I missed anything while I was sleeping. I usually do. Yep. Then when the weekday starts, the Academy of Pediatrics will send out something called a Smart Brief to kind of give you the highlights of other things I may have missed. And I may choose something from there to share as well. So it's not, but to be honest, Twitter has become so important to me. Like I really won't see patients until I've seen Twitter, just because I've gotten burned a couple times by people who have known the Academy of Pediatrics guideline release, or have known a story that has been released, or saw something on the Today Show that I had no clue about, and that really kind of takes a hit in your reputation as an up-to-date physician if your patient is coming in and saying, well, what do you mean? The Academy released a statement this morning. Why don't you know about it? So it allows me to avoid those awkward situations and keep up with the pace of medical knowledge, which is crazy fast.
So, are you a smartphone person or are you a PC person?
I am a Mac.
Okay, Mac. Believe me, this is a Mac office, and so I meant by that desktop. So you get up, you fire that up, you go into the office, and knowing that the AAP just released some comment about, I don't know, quadrivalent flu vaccine this year.
Sure.
You feel empowered, and then so does something happen usually throughout the day where all of a sudden you're like, I've got to get that message out to Twitter? Is that how it works?
Typically, I'll usually shoot off a few in the morning. I'll see what people are talking about throughout the day, and go from there. And I'm not. I use these tools. I really want to avoid the noise. I mean, there's so many doctors on Twitter now. There's a lot of places you can turn for information. I'm not going to just regurgitate a whole bunch of stuff when you've got other good resources for that. So I really want to keep it what's happening in my office, in my doors in Kansas City. And if that's what I see, that's what I'm going to share. Because if I'm just generically sharing random stuff from the AAP that's not relevant, people aren't going to read it. And I really want them to look to us to a site. So I do have to see patients for a while in order to determine what I'm posting on.
Well, one thing I've noticed from your blog and from your Twitter feed is that you have a Kansas City focus, which I think is what makes it actually the most relevant. You don't have to talk about frostbite in Kansas City, or at least the way I do anyway. And I think that part is, I'm highlighting this because I'm hoping that we have some people who are listening right now who are on the fence and wondering, like, oh my word, how could I possibly be the conduit for all pediatric medical knowledge in the United States that comes through every day? And the point is that you don't. You're already the conduit for medical knowledge that happens in your community. It just happens on your overworked phone bank. And Twitter's a way to, like, get some pressure off of your nurses and some pressure off of you. At least that's the way I view it.
No,
Natasha, do you think that? Sorry, go ahead.
I think I've heard that too. Oh, there's so many pediatric bloggers now. There's so many this. There's so many that. Why do I possibly have to join? And I think that's a really, really important point, Chip. Is that it doesn't matter if Dr. Claire wrote a great article about pink eye. Your patients, they still want to hear it from you. That you want to validate that information and say, yes, I believe what Dr. Claire is saying is true, but they do need to hear it from you. And you need to have people in your community that are in pulse with infectious disease and safety issues and current events in order to make that relevant and real and something people are going to want to read.
Yep,
yeah, I think that would be there is a lot of people out there, but there's also a lot of great content out there. So I rely on you, on Wendy Sue Swanson, Dr. Swanson, all these other people that I know that they're doing the vetting for me, and I can rely because they're trustworthy. I already know them, and so if they post something of interest, then I don't really have to go down the path of identifying if in fact it is, because I know that they've already done the legwork. So yeah, I think that also plays. It can help. You don't have to do it, but at the same time, there's already content out there that you don't necessarily feel obligated to have to create content yourself all the time.
No, you don't have to create the content, but it's always helpful if it's still relevant to something that's going on in your practice.
Yeah, complementary, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. That you don't have to feel the burden of always creating content for your community, because there's plenty of people out there doing some great stuff. Do you think that that nowadays, with the new kind of docs coming on, the younger docs, that it's a responsibility for them to be on Twitter? Is there like a responsibility of this education, and that should be happening online?
I think they're recognizing that. I think that to be true. If you come into my office, and I work with residents all the time, one of their first things I do is ask for their Twitter handle, because that's how we're going to communicate for the month. I think there needs to be a competence. There needs to be a digital competence, because it's going to be unrealistic for you. You may not be on Facebook, you may not be on Twitter, I get it, but you will be emailing your patients, you will have digital communication, even if you don't realize it. I mean, everybody's going to have access to their EMR records, right? So someday, everybody is going to see your digital ability to communicate. And some people can do that really well and some people can't. And so whenever residents are in the office, they recognize this and we walk through, okay, here's an email I got, how are you going to respond to that? Here's a tweet that I got, how are you going to respond to that? What's the language you use? What's the wording that you use in order to be comfortable with that medium, but also be not be risky and too rogue with what you're talking about.
So you're suggesting that, I mean, this is part of the education process of residents.
Well, if you come to see me, it is.
That's great. I think that's, so your answer is yes. Essentially, it's like this is a must, and to some extent, we have a responsibility. And I think that I would even go beyond that. I think the word that I was looking for, not so much a responsibility, which that is important, but as I think about this, I think that I'm almost inclined to say boldly that there's an obligation to have a presence. Would you agree with that, or no?
Well, I think the obligation is a strong word. I think you have an obligation to understand these channels and to be able to refer your patients to good sources and to use the internet to educate yourself. But I do have partners and I do have other physicians whose skills of writing and whose skill of communicating in a digital way would put them at risk.
Okay.
So if I told every single physician that they had to do this, I think that it would cause some problems and put some people who are not familiar and who are forced to use these tools in a position where they could reveal something that maybe they shouldn't. But that does not excuse them from not knowing the channels, not knowing what's in Facebook, not knowing what's on the Today Show, and not knowing what a Twitter feed is. I mean, because I think that those are so vital in the ways that you receive communication now that you will be missing out if you don't choose to find something that you can keep abreast of what's happening with your patients.
That's a great point. I'm glad you clarified that, because one of my questions, my follow-up question was going to be, and I knew the answer to this, but I wanted you to answer, is the social media thing for everybody? I mean, so everybody, and then you're clearly saying that no, that there's a responsibility to understand it, but there's not necessarily an obligation to participate in the same way that perhaps you're participating.
I think so, because I do think as the younger generation comes through, more and more will be willing. They're very comfortable with digital media. They're very comfortable communicating online. But if I laid the hammer down and said that every one of my partners must put up a blog post or must put up a Facebook feed, I think it would get really messy. I think some people have a gift to do that and some people don't. Yeah. But regardless, everybody has a Twitter feed and everybody's following on Facebook here, regardless of you saying anything. So I think you have an obligation to use them. I don't know if you necessarily have an obligation to talk on them. Okay.
Got it. I'm going to shift gears, Chip, if that's okay with you. I want to talk about a project that Natasha is involved in, unless you have anything
No, I think I was going to make the same suggestion.
Yeah. So, Natasha, you have a project called, I don't know if this is the name of the organization or what your project is called, but I have the Shot at Life. That's an organization that you support, correct?
Right. That's an organization that I support. I'm really proud of this organization and my involvement. I started, a couple of years back, we had a measles epidemic that we're still fighting, but Kansas City was right in the center of a measles epidemic with over 9 cases reported in just a 2-week period, and we really had a problem. We were facilitating information about this epidemic on our social channels and promoting people to be protected from the disease through vaccination. And we really feel strongly, not only as an individual, but as a group, that vaccination truly does save lives, and it's a safe and effective way to do so. So we started partnering with this organization called Shot at Life, which is part of the UN Foundation. And it specifically focuses on protecting children all over the world from measles, polio, diarrhea, and pneumonia. Those are the 4 most common causes for disability and death worldwide for children. One of my challenges through that measles epidemic here in Kansas City was that there were so many of my families that really wanted to help. They knew that there were other kids out there that didn't have those vaccines, and that measles came to Kansas City through an airplane ride from some place where they didn't have access. And so once that kind of stopped, I really wanted to use our position here as pediatric and vaccine experts, so to speak, and say, here's a platform that you as a patient could support, and say something positive about vaccines, that you support vaccines, and that you know that they're good for our community and for your kids. Because I really think that there's a position that's lacking. We hear all this anti-vaccine, and we really don't give our patients and our families a way to say, you know what, I do support vaccines. And so this was a way to partner with an organization that is going to provide protection against measles and the other diseases in response to what happened in our own community, and speak not only with your mouth, but with your dollars. And our community has embraced it, and we've done 2 different projects in office donation for Shot at Life, and just in those 2 projects, we've raised almost $10,000 for Shot at Life.
Nice.
Cool.
So how did you get the people, your patients involved? So you were hearing that people wanted to get involved, and you found out, or through the research perhaps found out about Shot at Life, and then so how did you put the 2 together though? I
put the 2 together by I really wanted a place to specifically respond to measles. So that's where I got hooked up with Shot at Life personally, because I wanted a place, I wanted an organization that was going to give measles vaccines to children. And so that's where I got partnered in it. When we brought it into the office, we did it very simply. I mean, it was totally a grassroots effort and essentially an experiment, like most of my projects typically are.
Yeah.
But we just put up banners that said, if you get a shot, would you give a shot? And ask for $1. Because it's $1 through the Shot at Life to give 1 measles vaccine. And we left just a little bucket in the exam rooms. But if you're going to get a shot today, can you give a shot to a kid that could use one? And we left the buckets out. And people
you did like a Tom's. So you did like a Tom's where the buy one, give one type of thing. I love it. Okay.
It was very simple. And what was so interesting for me, too, is it really opened up vaccine dialogue. I'm very passionate about vaccines. I think it's really there's so much misinformation. It really fuels a lot of that we do on social media. I think as a whole for pediatrics, but specifically for myself. And it was a way to talk with families who really do support vaccines and get their real feelings and experiences with them too. So it really opened up some great dialogue with patients who we might otherwise not talk to them about vaccines. You want to get your shots? Great. Have any questions? No. That's the typical interaction for my pro-vaccine people. We don't really discuss, I've met this lady at the playground and she doesn't vaccinate her kids, so what do I do? Or I have this uncle that's still asking me questions about this. What should I say? I mean, these great dialogues that stem from it, and then they would leave, and at the end of the day, these buckets would be overflowing with cash. It was really quite remarkable to be able to just give an opportunity to what I believe is a really important cause, to validate that cause by our practice standing behind it, and then just let the patient speak for themselves.
I can't tell you how cool that what you just said, because as a marketing guy, in talking a lot about differentiating the practice and telling different stories, one of my marketing talks, I spend a lot of time about the storytelling aspect, and you have companies that have great stories, and I always reference Harley Davidson, for example. Like, what comes to mind when you hear Harley Davidson, and then it's like freedom, Americana, roughness, But the funny thing is that most people that ride Harley Davidsons are like CEOs, the ones that can afford these. But the story is about being this rebel, this maverick, and all this other stuff. That's the story. So I focus that on the practice side, saying that we need to tell stories as well, because that's what really sells. So when they hear our practice names or one of our doctors' name, what is the first thing that comes to mind? And as we're trying to differentiate ourselves, and everybody's saying about, for example, the retail clinics are, they're going to eat our lunches and they're doing these things. Well, if we're offering the exact same services that they are without a story, then why would I wouldn't want to pay more if I'm going to get the exact same thing down the street. So it has to be a little bit more. And of course, clinically we provide a lot more. So I'm not comparing that, but I think that if we can attach a story to our practice, because Walgreens is not going to have this personal story, this community, this thing about supporting Kansas City. They're going to have this thing about nationwide or whatever. But your practice has done a great job of creating a little niche of supporting the community, becoming trusted sources of information, supporting causes. So, like you said, putting your mouth, your money where your mouth is, and at the same time doing the benefits of the clinical side, where you're opening up, you're creating a platform, if you will, or opening up discussion points or opportunities to talk even more. Because I always hear within our, Chips and I circle, complaining about these people just don't get it, and they're just kind of going against well, those people are never going to get it, so I'm not going to engage with them. These are some of the positions that some of the doctors take, and others are a little bit more, well, let's talk about it, but how do I take it to convince them? How do I take it to convince them? And the fact of the matter is that most people are not going to be persuaded by a statistics, or because they saw a spreadsheet on measles vaccine, how many children die of measles, because it's very difficult. It's very to kind of understand it, because it's not personal. But if you tell a story about somebody that that comes to your community, that goes to your kid's school, that actually got the disease or somebody, then that right there changes the entire perspective. And I'm not saying that that's going to automatically persuade people, but it certainly does a better job than saying 9 people died, 9 children died last year of within 2 weeks, and it's like, oh, that's too bad. People feel bad, but it's not. There's no. I mean, this is why they show kids starving, and not to be cruel or anything, on TV, because if they just say children are dying, that's not going to move anybody. A kid actually dying is what's going to move people. But so there's just so many great lessons in that story that you just told that well, I love it.
And it was a great project all around. Corporately, we matched our second project, so I think we had skin in the game there, and I think our patients appreciated that. And I do think, I think a lot of practices have these stories. I just think that they need a platform, and they need permission to share them. I mean, a lot of people were very questioning, can you even collect money for philanthropy with your patients in your office? And, well, I don't know, let's see if they give money. And they, and they certainly did. So, I mean, I think a lot of practices just need permission to share those stories, to make those impact, and to recognize how much impact you can have just, in such a small scale that can really have worldwide impact, and national impact.
When you say permission, you're saying permission from. So I'd like to clarify that permission, like from who? Who do you need permission from?
I don't know. Isn't that what all doctors ask for? Is that okay that we do that? Can we do that?
Right.
Well, who does what? Who does they? I don't know. I mean, everybody just we're notoriously a group of people that need to be blessed with permission before we do anything, and I read that stifles a lot of these efforts. So I'm not sure who permission from, but everybody wanted permission from somebody, and so I said,
well, the reason why I asked for that, because in one of my talks I talk about that we don't need permission for a lot of the things that we do. So in the past we had to be picked. So if you wanted to write something, you had to send it to the editor or something like that, and then maybe so we had to ask permission. Hey, Mr. Editor, would you please publish me? There's if you wanted to be on TV, of course, how difficult. You had to hire a PR firm or something like that. So now we don't need permission to do that, because you, in fact, and I'm going to do a segue here with you with your Shot at Life. You shot a video and you put it online, and I'm not sure how many people saw it, but I'm sure that you got a great exposure. But you didn't have to wait for the local CBS affiliate, to do a story on you. And in fact, I know that you have appeared Good Morning America, or where was it that you appeared?
CBS this morning.
Okay, CBS. But it wasn't they came knocking at you, you asking to have a space. Because of your presence and what you do, they found out about you, and then they give you the platform. But you didn't wait for anybody to give you permission to blog, to tweet, to help your community, to all these things. You didn't ask for permission. The tools were there in the distribution. Another thing that I wanted to jump in, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but you talked about a way to distribute information, free and things like that. You can say that Oprah has, I don't know, million, gazillion, people that listens to you, but social media gives you the opportunity to almost reach that same amount of people when you connect everybody together. So in aggregate. So I just want to emphasize the permission is that for most things, you don't need permission at all, and we now have the tools to be able. We have studios, we have recording equipment, like me and Chip are doing this right now, right? We have a distribution. One of the most greatest inventions since the Edinburgh Press. To distribute information to whoever we want to. We just have to have great information or good content. Yeah, that's why I just wanted to mention that, because we don't need information. So, sorry, we don't need permission. I don't know what I was talking about.
All right, hey Brandon.
Yeah, we're getting to the end, right?
Yes, we have to let poor Dr. Berger go take care of some patients, which is far more important than talking to us.
She's got more tweets to do, I think, right? She's got to. She has to tweet on the, these guys are, what are these guys talking about? I have no idea. She has to talk bad about us. That's what she's waiting to do.
So when we post this blog, and when we post this post, we will have links to Shot at Life and your blog and your Twitch stuff. So when you gain 3 more followers, we'll know that we were in the house. If you have anything else, though, that you would like our copious listeners to know about, now is your chance. Please, by all means, self-promote all you want, though not that you need it, because your
Actually, can we turn this around and say, hey, could you please give us a shout out and promote us? That's what we need to do, Chip. We need to turn this around.
I don't want
to say 6,000. She had like 6,000 more followers than both of us combined. So.
So anything that you want the world to know about before we let you go?
No, I think it would be great if people were looking for a place to share their hard-earned money. I think Shot at Life is a great place to do it and support those vaccines for those kids. And I would also say that for anyone who's still on the fence about social media, I think that for all intents and purposes, we get kind of freaked out about what we can and can't post and what we should post and all that kind of stuff. But I would just encourage people to get involved and just to listen and to watch and to learn, because that's how all of us in social media started out. We joined a few places, we checked it out, and we decided whether or not it was for them or not. And if you're getting the nudge, you'll be ready to jump in, and we'll love to see you there.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you. We will see you all at our next episode. I hope we can keep getting guests as good as this, Brandon.
Yeah, that worked out really well.
All right, well, thank you, and we will see you all.